Mercedes are about to enter a new era, one without a world champion on their team, but they won't let that drag them down as they are anticipating to start 2025 full speed with massive changes to the W16. After 3 miserable years of the ground rules era, Mercedes believes that Russell's and Hamilton's issues in 2024 were caused by a combination of sensitivity to brake lockup and snaps of oversteer during qualifying laps and races. But they have now found the solution for the W16 that will be driven by Russell and Antonelli. Especially Hamilton had a difficult season with the W15 as he struggled to get as much out of his car in qualifying as teammate George Russell. Russell outqualified him 24-6, including 6 sprint events, for a total of 19-5 if the sprints are excluded. That loss to Russell was only a few tenths at times, but with the F1 grid so competitive last season, it was enough to drop Hamilton numerous places down the grid, making his Sunday recovery more difficult. Andrew Shovlin, Mercedes' head of trackside engineering, stated that Hamilton was eventually impeded by a car that was too slow and had a limited setup window. However, there were other aspects of the 7-time world champion's racing style that made him less comfortable extracting everything possible on fresh tyres. "The car hasn't been quick enough, and that's been the thing we've been trying to solve," Shovlin added, commenting on Hamilton's troubles. "The car hasn't been easy to get into a nice balance window, and particularly once you get there, keeping it there has been a challenge." Beyond all of that, I think Lewis has struggled on a single lap. His race pace has been there throughout the weekend, but it's just with a close grid, you often start a few places behind your teammate, and then you're held up and you can't show what you can do. But the read on Lewis's race pace has been very good. He showed in Las Vegas that if he has a car that works the way he wants, he can fight right back to the front. And we very much saw the old Lewis. According to Shovlin, Hamilton was not particularly comfortable with certain aspects of the qualifying runs. "The issue really for him has just been when you are trying to extract that last tenth or two," he said. "It's been difficult in terms of trying to avoid brake locking, trying to avoid snaps on exit. It's just those issues. But the way the team looks at that is that we needed to give Lewis a car more like the one we had in Vegas, where it does suit his style, and he can do his best work with it." While there appears to be a trend of drivers with strong brakes, such as Hamilton, Daniel Ricciardo, and Kevin Magnussen, all facing issues with this generation of ground effect cars, Shovlin is not convinced that is the fundamental factor. He thinks that perhaps more important has been the challenge of rotating cars on the throttle, but without overheating the rears. "I think these days, a lot of it is keeping heat out of the rear tyres," he said. "If you approach a corner in a way that means that they're hot, or if you're having to turn the car on the throttle, then you will struggle with that. Braking style may be a factor in amongst it all, but I don't really know enough about Magnussen and Ricciardo to know whether that was their issue. But certainly keeping the heat out of the rear tyres on a single lap is the most important thing at about half to 2/3 of the circuits." Russell's ability to consistently get more out of the W15 hinted that his and Hamilton's styles may differ. However, Shovlin did not believe there was an evident explanation for Russell's improved performance in qualifying. When asked if there was an explanation based on the data, Shovlin replied, "I mean, not really in the style or approach, because Lewis is wise enough to know that if something is working for George, he can adapt his driving to go in that direction. There are things that you can see that ultimately, when they really start pushing, then that's when you start to get the snaps of oversteer on exit. And that, on occasion, is an area that Lewis might suffer more from than George. But, as I said, the focus for our year has been, how do we get the car in a way that Lewis needs to allow him to drive it on the limit and not suffer those problems?" In the end, they weren't really able to get the car right, but it did provide them a lot of data and knowledge. And for 2025, according to George Russell, Mercedes has evaluated its Formula One car plans and expects to make adjustments in various areas. The team's troubles since the summer break spurred a thorough examination of its W15 design in recent weeks, particularly as it commits to its rival for the following year. And, based on what it learnt from that work at its Brackley manufacturing, Russell has announced that some big changes will be made to its W16. These weeks off have been great because it's allowed us all to take a step back and reassess the car as a whole, also looking into next year, according to him. we've definitely uncovered a few things that we want to be changing going into next year. And when you're in the midst of a season, you sometimes don't have that opportunity to really dig deep into the fundamentals of the car. So that's been really positive to see. Mercedes unveiled the first of its 2025 package modifications earlier this year at the United States Grand Prix, with the intention that it would improve its position compared to the competition. However, it somehow changed the handling of the car. Obviously, we reverted with the upgrades that we brought to Spa, added the Briton. So, effectively, we're making 2 steps now, and we bring this upgrade. So, we're hoping it's going to have quite an impact. I hope with the upgrade, we can be in the fight again, at least in qualifying, and fighting for those top 4 places. And then, in the race, fighting for a podium. But realistically, we know McLaren and Lando Norris are a good step ahead of everyone right now. While Mercedes appeared to regress since the summer break, Russell's teammate Lewis Hamilton has claimed that part of the reason was that it was out of sync with competitors in terms of update introduction. "We've been a bit out of sequence to the others," he said. "The others have brought upgrades at times when we haven't. We ultimately lost our way a little bit with setup, trying to get as much from this floor that is slowly deteriorating as it gets old." For Mercedes, the second part of the season was mostly focused on trying out different iterations of upgrades that could prove to be major baseline improvements for the W16. And after the season, Mercedes has revealed the major area for improvement as they focus on their 2025 F1 car. Mercedes' trackside engineering director, Andrew Shovlin, says the team recognizes the W15 was weak in slow corners, which is a crucial target for their 2025 Challenger. Where we tend to be weak, it is in the slow speed corners, particularly the ones where you have got one corner following into another, Shovlin said. There is a lot of turning of the car, and that is a weakness that we need to work on. We did not expect this update kit to improve that. All we expected was this to just lift the base performance of the car. In terms of what we have seen, we are confident it is doing what was expected. However, we are also confident there are some fundamentals that we have got to get to grips with on this car in order to fix them on the W16. And we are very busy with that right now, and hopefully making the right changes over the winter so that we are not struggling with these weaknesses next year. Shovlin stated that Mercedes continued to experiment with the car in order to figure out why they performed worse at times in 2024. The main thing in terms of learning is that the corners that we are weak in are still the same ones. It is the interconnected, slow corners. That is normally where we trip up, he continued. The big focus in these remaining races for us was learning what we can. We were in a position in the championship where we couldn't challenge in front of us. It was also very unlikely we are going to see any challenge from behind. Our focus has very much shifted to learning what we need to this year to apply to next year in order to get on top of those issues. Mercedes believes the remaining 3 rounds in Las Vegas, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi has given valuable learning opportunities after the latest changes to the W15. We are going to be looking at all the remaining tracks to assess performance and just confirm what we understand about this car and whether the changes we are hoping to make for next year are going to improve those areas, according to Shovlin. Vegas has a lot of straight line and low-speed corners. Qatar is a faster track. And then, finishing in Abu Dhabi, which is a mix of everything, it will give us a good read on how we are performing and who is the benchmark. Sometimes it is Red Bull, sometimes McLaren, sometimes Ferrari, but it will allow us to establish the gap that we need to close down over those winter months. So, what do you think? Will they be able to build on what they produced on the back end of the season? Will they show us that they're a great team after all? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below.